watching Behind the Headlines. I'm Pacchia. I'm happy to say we have Frank Aquila back in the chair today to clue us in on what's happening in the M&A space. Frank, thanks for joining us. Welcome, my friend.
Good to see you, Lee.
Likewise. So we're starting off 2013 after a rather busy end to 2012. Deal flow spiked in Q4, at least in terms of volume. But was that a result mostly of year-end issues, or are we going to see this trend continue into the new year?
To some extent, Lee, 2012 was a bit disappointing. We had expected it to be a very robust year for M&A, and to some extent, the only quarter that really lived up to expectations was the fourth quarter. Some of that was because economic issues were resolved during the course of the year. The election was over, but I think part of it was a lot of people wanted to get deals done because of the tax changes. So there was a spike in activity because of that. Having said that, the start of the year is off to a fairly good start. Volumes are up. We're seeing big transactions getting done, rumored to be done, and I think we're going to see a fairly good Q1 of 2013. I think it will be a bigger first quarter than we saw in 2012, probably a bigger first quarter than we've seen in a few years.
So you work on a lot of cross-border transactions. When you look at the state of play as it relates to cross-border, we're now in mid-February. What trends are starting to emerge?
One thing that's obviously a factor is that you're seeing companies look at the global marketplace. They're looking at their long-term strategic plan. To some extent, they haven't been able to do that over the last few years because some of the real acute financial issues and economic issues. So companies are looking at Asia. They're looking at Latin America, wanting to invest there. Companies that are emerging from those economies are looking to North America, not so much to Europe. They're looking at acquisitions in Europe, but to the extent that European companies already have a good footprint in emerging markets, it's a good way to, it's sort of what Kraft did with Cadbury. It wasn't so much that they wanted Cadbury's English or UK business, but they really wanted the business that Cadbury had built around the world. And so I think you're going to see transactions like that. I think one other factor that we still don't know exactly how it's going to play out is the currency fluctuations.
Right.
Certainly the yen has fallen dramatically. That may mean that this is a very good time for companies to think about making acquisitions in Japan. Certainly Japanese companies have been thinking long and hard about making acquisitions outside of Japan because they have a very mature home market. They need to find markets outside of Japan. So I think currency fluctuations, which in and of themselves don't cause deals to happen, but they are factors in which deals companies do and how they finance them.
Right. It's certainly fascinating to think about all the factors that go into spurring something on a macro level, like merger and acquisition activity. I understand the move in the yen that we've seen. While dramatic, it's probably not in and of itself something that can be the primary factor in spurring deal activity. But if the yen continues to move in the direction it has been, at some point it's going to become the primary motivation, right?
I don't know if it would ever become the primary motivation, but certainly it's going to become much more of a factor both for Japanese companies and companies that are looking to make acquisitions in Japan. What I would say is that you don't look at any one particular factor. Most companies that do a fairly significant amount of M&A tend to look at a range of different factors. They tend to be looking at a variety of different takeover targets. So something like a spike in an exchange rate or a drop in a commodity price can affect whether they go after target A or target D. So you have to look at a variety of different factors. And sometimes you think you're going to go after target C, and then something happens in the run-up to launching that bid, and you decide you're not going to do any deal, or you're going to go after another target.
Yeah. I wonder how this is all starting to affect law firms. The past couple of years have been kind of rough on big law. You guys are almost always busy, but a lot of other of the AmLaw 100 firms really can't say that over the last 2 years. Is this spike in merger and acquisition activity starting to get people to the point where they're a little bit busier, or they can say they are?
I think it depends on a firm by firm basis, as you say. I mean, we're traditionally pretty busy. Certainly, we're busy when the M&A markets are active. I think that there are lots of issues confronting law firms as they're confronting investment banks and industry generally. Certainly, when corporate activity picks up, it's good for those service providers that are involved in those sorts of transactions. So to the extent that the economy picks up, to the extent that corporate activity picks up, whether it's M&A, IPOs, whatever, it's going to be good for lawyers who do that sort of work.
Yeah, we've been talking on this program how a lot of law firms are actually finding themselves as participants in the mergers and acquisition space. A lot of law firms are
no, we're
getting
seeing
hits at
that.
this
We're
point.
seeing UK firms, merging with firms here in the U.S. and Australia and other parts of the world.
I want to pick your brain on the potential merger between American Airlines and U.S. Airways. It feels like this idea of merging in bankruptcy or shortly thereafter is kind of the go-to play for large operators in the airline space. Are we ever going to get to a point where there are true restructurings vis-a-vis the airlines?
Well, I think we're certainly getting to an end game with respect to the U.S. consolidation of the airline sector. The real question and the real challenge is going to be whether we go beyond just national consolidations and whether governments allow cross-border consolidations. To some extent, the airline industry has tried to replicate that by the alliances like One World and the Star Alliance, but those are not true consolidations in the way you have in other sectors. So that's really the next frontier, if you will, and I would think it's in shareholders and consumers' best interest that you be able to have an airline that operates on a global basis.
We're always looking for the negative catalysts on the horizon. You have all the usual suspects: potential discord in D.C., problems in the Eurozone. What specifically keeps you up at night in terms of what could kind of kill the good momentum you've been seeing in your space?
I shouldn't have to worry about what the folks in Washington, D.C. do. They should be doing everything to make the U.S. economy robust, or at least standing out of the way. I think we have the sequestration that's about to take place. That could have profoundly negative effects on the economy. The way they fix it may have profoundly negative effects on the economy. In addition to that, I think you always have what's going on in the Middle East that could cause a spike in petroleum prices, which I think becomes less and less a factor as the U.S. and North America generally becomes more energy independent, which is a very good thing. But quite honestly, I'm more optimistic February of 2013 than I was February 2012 or February 2011, because to a certain extent, the negatives are built in. Europe has issues, structural and otherwise, but we know about them and they're tolerable. China's probably not going to grow as much as it did in the last decade, but we recognize that. So there are things that people were concerned about a year ago that are either built in today or people are less concerned about today.
All right, so good vibes so far in 2013 in the M&A space. Frank, thanks for stopping by.
Good to see you.
That's Frank Aquila, partner at the law firm Sullivan Cromwell. If you'd like to learn more about the cases and issues we just discussed, be sure to go check out our offerings on BloombergLaw.com and also on the Bloomberg Terminal. You can see more of our videos on YouTube, and you can follow our updates on Twitter. Thanks for watching.